Welcome to the Impatient Entrepreneur Podcast, a show where we hear from entrepreneurs and business owners who are chomping at the bit to make their mark on the world. I'm your host, Lauren Quidar-Cockrell. Now, let's hurry up and get to the good stuff. Hi, friends. Welcome back. We have a fun show in store for us today. I'm sure of it. We have Scott Edwards, a lifelong entrepreneur who has an interesting trajectory and career path to share with us today. And I cannot wait for stories, probably some laughs along the way. I don't know. I'll be chuckling, I bet. But anyway, Scott, welcome to the show.
Oh, wow, Lauren, I'm so excited to be here. This is such a great thing. I've been impatient to be on this podcast. It's so exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Scott Edwards. Thank you. Thank you. You can sit down in the back now. All right, that's enough of that. And it's just so wonderful because you have such a great podcast. In fact, your opening music and everything is very professional, very nice.
Well, thank you. We endeavor to be professional while having a good time.
Well, I'm just saying, as a podcaster, I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and some have kind of some not interesting openings, and yours is very well done, and I wanted to congratulate you on that. And you've had some great guests on, so that makes it even more wonderful to be here. I'm honored to be a part of the Impatient Entrepreneur.
Thank you, Scott. It really does mean a lot to me. The tracks I labored over to pick the music, and all, it's I'm a recovering perfectionist, but we do put a lot of thought and effort into making it a great experience for our guests and listeners. So thank you. I do really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and the fact that you come out of Fort Worth, Texas, and have all that professionalism. It's not New York. It's not LA. It's Texas. Right. I mean, I'm half expecting to see, cow horns behind you on the wall.
No, they're in the backyard. All right, Scott. Okay, let's dive in here. I'm just going to start with the first official question. Are you an impatient entrepreneur?
Yes. Oh, yes. And that's one of the things that was really interesting about your podcast and the title of it, that I think one of the skills, skill's not the right word. One of the aspects of being an entrepreneur is that we are by nature impatient. We want to get to that next adventure. And I'm a great example of that, from starting my first company at age 17 and going on and opening over a dozen companies. At one point in my life, I actually had a goal for myself to open a new business every year.
Oh, wow.
So, I was very impatient and wanted to always feel that exhilaration of starting something new and creative.
Yes, I do think that in life, there are people who are great starters and there are people who are great finishers, and maybe there's some people holding us together in the middle. You
definitely need those. Yeah, Lauren, you need those core people to hold people like me together. And I was very blessed to have a couple women come along. I mean, I had a couple partners that kind of went along for the ride, but I generally leaned on some important women in my life. One of them's now my bride, but that were able to, I would start something, get it going, and then I'd move on to the next project. And so I would leave this trail of companies that I would put other people in charge of and to run day to day. Does that sound like what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
That's the impatient part. I was ready for the next thing.
Interesting. Yeah, some people start new companies. Some people start almost like businesses within a business, or they just focus on new services, new offerings within the same company. But you were the literal definition of a serial entrepreneur, or are, not where you are.
Yeah, I was very blessed. I mean, my first company, I was 17. I had a couple partners. We were A&A Restripe. We painted lines in parking lots. And I did that for a few years and cut my teeth on commercial sales and talking to business owners. And then I went into the portable DJ business. That's right. I was spinning disco records before disco was popular and Saturday Night Live came out. Yes, I'm old. But I did that for a few years and got a great experience in selling our services to schools and libraries, and we did weddings and all kinds of things. But the big one was when I was 24, and I experienced down in Los Angeles a comedy club, a small satellite room of the Comedy Store, which is now famous on Sunset Boulevard. But this was a little satellite club. And I just thought it was amazing. And I'm in Sacramento, California, kind of a large government town, but pretty sleepy entertainment-wise and culture-wise. And I was able to start a comedy club. What was amazing, Lauren, is that this club was very successful. It was I opened in 1980, so it was the Reagan years. There was huge money being spent. Comedy was brand new. I was the 12th club in the entire country that was doing time comedy. Yeah, number 12. And now it's still going. It's one of the oldest clubs in the country. So one of the first, one of the oldest. But what was really exciting as the impatient entrepreneur is that was so successful and there was such huge cash flow that I felt that I could do other things that I was interested in. And I ended up opening a couple different restaurants outside of the comedy club. I opened up other comedy clubs. I ended up having a chain of them. I opened a couple art galleries because my mom was an artist and she kind of raised me with an appreciation of talent in the world of art. And so I had a couple art galleries where I could share that with the public. And then I kind of did some crazy things because, one, I had the money at that point. You know, most of the companies I did were by the seat of my pants and borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, right? You know, when I opened the comedy club, I was dead broke, but I finagled a deal with a large restaurant that had a banquet room. I got to use their banquet room to open my comedy club for free. I didn't have to pay any lease or anything, but they made the drink and food money, and I made the door. And so a lot of negotiation and sharing of ideas while I built the entity to the point where I could open up my own freestanding club. But what I was getting to was that I was a little too impatient, a little too crazy. I took some of the financial success from that chain of comedy clubs and I bought a submarine.
Oh, no.
And I'm not kidding.
Of all the places I thought you were going, that was not on my bingo card.
Well, the restaurants were all very successful. The art galleries were, they didn't lose money. They didn't really make a lot of money. But I was, what I was trying to get to as an entrepreneur with all this creative energy, that when an idea came along, it's like, you know, some people say when a door closes, a window opens or whatever. Well, when an opportunity was made available to me, I would jump in with both feet. And sometimes it was a huge mistake. Financially, owning a submarine was a huge disaster, but it was so much fun. I helped launch this company, was doing submarines in Hawaii and around different tropical areas. And so I had one built and we put it in Monterey, California. Well, there was great tourists. It was right next to the aquarium, but the water was too cold and we had to have extra expenses with scuba divers to clean the algae off the windows. And anyway, ended up being a huge financial loss. But I got to drive and own a submarine, and it was a tourist business, and we had a lot of fun with it for about 2 years before we sold it to the Wrigley Gum family. It's still operating out of Catalina Island off of LA.
Yeah,
and then the other thing that was really fun, but not a real moneymaker, I owned a beach shack on the big island of Hawaii at the King Kamehameha Hotel. And again, I was about 27 at this point, single, a lot of young women on the beaches. And, well, they had to buy sunscreen and get their umbrellas and stuff somewhere. So I was renting and selling out of this beach shack. And I had that for about 5 years. And really what it was a business reason. I got to fly over to Hawaii several times a year and it was all a great tax write-off.
Yeah. You just write it off.
Well, I was working, but my point of the story, Lauren, is that as an entrepreneur, I think it's so important. Not, I don't know if important, but what makes us who we are is that if given the opportunity, we're willing to jump in and try something, good or bad, and try to benefit the world around us. I mean, all these adventures were interest of mine and kind of out of my heart, but they were all based on tourism or customer service or taking care of people. They weren't self-indulgent in that way. They were always something. I employed many hundreds of people, so I was providing jobs, and there's a lot of advantages besides the challenges of being the impatient entrepreneur and opening a business anytime you can.
That I'm listening, and it feels so deeply chaotic.
Well, it was, and like I said, I was lucky to have a family of employees around me that helped guide me and keep me a little bit tempered. I'd be going up this way, and they'd kind of reel me back a little bit. Well, why don't we do this and do that? But you, I believe, interviewed, was it Brian Clayton?
Yes.
Did I get the name right? That was talking about the 10-year overnight success.
Yes.
That is always how it feels. But the reality is, what he's saying is there's no such thing as an overnight success. It takes time and commitment and a lot of hard work. And even though I had all these fun projects, each and every one had its own challenges and needed a management team and needed a staff and needed marketing and promoting. And I am probably a little bit crazy. I really enjoyed those challenges and took them on head on.
Okay, so you've taken us through your 20s a little bit. Where did things go for you from there? Take us kind of to today at a high level here, your journey.
Well, I'll try to not bore anybody, but what's great about all these experiences and listening to your podcast is a great way to assimilate some of that information. Is each and every business you learn something. So you're always growing. So I started my first company at 17. By the time I opened the chain of comedy clubs, I was 24. I had that for 21 years. And during that time, I'm opening these other businesses. And finally, in 2001, I was about 44 years old, and I thought, okay, it's time to sell and kind of early, retire. But I wasn't really retiring, but no entrepreneur ever retires. But I was ready to move on to something else. There was changes in the comedy industry and in entertainment. And so I sold the business, the comedy club. It's still operating today, but not under my tutelage. And I took those monies from the sale of the business and was able to start new adventures using the experience from the past. And a great example of where it took me was, by this time I was married to one of the young ladies that really helped get me through things. And I said, I've accomplished some of my dreams and some of my goals and craziness. What do you want to do? And so it was her dream to be a travel agent.
Okay.
So what I did is that I took the funds that I made from selling my company and helped her open our our travel agency, but I put her through travel school. You have to learn certain things, and there's a lot of software. And we opened up our own travel agency. However, in the world of entrepreneurism, not everything is always under your own control. You know what I mean, Lauren? Because we opened up our travel agency, and not 5 weeks later, 9/11 happened.
Oh man, I was worried you were going to say that.
Yeah, we just got creamed. I mean, the travel industry changed. All the commissions stopped. People weren't not even allowed to travel for almost a year. It was. I was very stubborn and used some of my saved funds to keep it going. But eventually my wife goes, look, this isn't going to happen like it was. The commissions aren't there. People aren't traveling. And we ended up having to close that as a loss. But it was, at least she got to do it. And we did have some fun, in the beginning before things got too nutted up as travel agents. But that was, the next adventure wasn't mine. It was my bride's. And I think that being able to fund her and give her the opportunity to open up a business, and she was making the decisions and she was in charge, was really gratifying to me to see the happiness it brought her. But I wouldn't have been able to do that without the money and experience that I'd gained in previous decades.
Sure. So take us to today. I know you have a few projects going on.
Well, okay. So after the travel agency and being self-employed had its, we took some financial losses after 9/11, both in our investments and with the business. And so I thought, okay, maybe it's time to go work for somebody. I became right? That takes the risk out of it, right?
Yeah,
I was getting
right.
a paycheck every 2 weeks. So I became a fleet director for a local Ford store and was a commercial truck manager and fleet manager for this company for a number of years. It ended up actually going out of business, and I rode that ship down and actually sold off the last of the commercial trucks in auction. But it was a different experience, and I wasn't in charge, and what happened to the company had nothing to do with me. It was just the way the world was going at the time. Anyway, after working for somebody else for a while, I realized I needed to go back and be in charge of my own destiny. And I looked around and I thought, well, what industry is always has to be there? It's mandated by law. There's money in it long term. It's not a one-time sale like a truck. It's a one-time sale. Something that's perpetual and keeps going. And an industry I absolutely hated. So I went into insurance.
Oh my goodness.
And I opened up my own Farmers Insurance Brokerage. And for those that don't know, when you're a farmer's agent, you're independent. State Farm, the agents are employees, but under Farmers, we're independent agents. So we have to fund everything, but we get larger commissions, and then we get what's called a book of business that we get paid on every month. And so I did that, and that was my last. I did it for about 15 years. I sold that agency just last year, and retired for real this time. Not that I'm not doing 100 other things, but business-wise, that was the last entrepreneurial stage of my career life. And what was interesting about it, Lauren, was that it was a lot more grounded than the stuff I could get away with when I was younger. Right? You get into your 40s and 50s, you're looking for something with a little bit more stability. And insurance guaranteed. I had a large company behind me. Even though I owned my agency, Farmers was ultimately the claims payer and dealing with money. And I had to hire my staff and have an office location. So I still had that entrepreneurial control. And if I was lazy and laid back, I would have failed. But if you work hard and you build up your book of business, you can get something quite valuable at the end. And that was the final business type enterprise. As you know, Lauren, I'm doing other things now, but as an entrepreneur, that was the last big brick and mortar business. I've always been kind of a brick and mortar entrepreneur. Lauren, you talk to a lot of people in this new age. There are a lot of people that are building businesses for online. Do you find that most of the people that you're talking to started or in the brick and mortar side of it, or more online?
I'd say it's a mix for sure. We do have a fair amount of people doing something, either they have virtual business or they're selling a software as a service, or they're selling services like we are. But yeah, we've got some. It is trending a little bit more toward virtual, but boy, there's certainly plenty of brick and mortar needs out there. But yeah, maybe it's the podcasters are trending toward online people.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you've had such, you've had an author on, and you've had some other successful business
Mhm.
people. Jeff Gleason, I think, was a writer. There's different ways to make a living, and I come from that brick and mortar background where
Mhm.
all my companies, you had an office, you had a staff, you had payroll, you had all these other things you had to understand. Now, as a retiree, I've got 5 podcasts. I do it myself. There's no staff, and but I don't really make any money. I do it because I love what I'm doing,
Mhm.
and I'm able to base the podcast off of topics that I enjoy.
Mhm.
And I think that um, availability of doing things that tap into your own interest is so important. And I think the online world does offer more options that way. Is
Right.
that what you found?
I do. It's such an interesting world where you can spin up a business at the drop of a hat if you're not built, if you don't need a building to greet people, if you don't have a physical product, if you're basically selling ideas, then anybody can do it.
Right. I mean, one of the things that I've been good at over the last several decades is as a consultant or mentor for other people that want to get into business, because I truly understand, you know, you know what you need to do to sign a good lease, and that you need a business license, and that you
Mhm.
need the liability insurance, and that you need uh, the staffing, and how to do the marketing in the beginning. All those things that I went through many, many times, and so they're kind of ingrained in my psyche. I've been able to share with other young
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, and it's been a real joy for me to do that from time and again. In fact, the guy that bought me out on the insurance brokerage, I stayed on for over a year as a consultant, and helped him through a lot of the trials and tribulations an entrepreneur runs into when you go into a brick and mortar kind of business that he was unaware of, right?
Mhm.
And now it's been over a year, and he's getting a lot more settled in, and he kind of needs me less.
All grown up.
Yeah. But I'm proud of what he's accomplished, and the company that I started is thriving. So
That's great.
that's there. You take some pride in that.
Absolutely. So is there anything in particular that you're impatient about these days?
I think that my frustration or impatience is that I'm still working hard,
Mhm.
but I'm working towards things that bring joy to me and my audience. I mentioned I'm a podcaster. My main podcast, which has been on 5 years now, is based on stand-up comedy. And I probably should plug it. Stand-up comedy, your host and MC. But it was a way for me to reconnect with the comics that I loved working with, and the audiences I loved working with when I had my chain of comedy clubs. It was a really fun time for me. So the podcast allows me to share a lot of that comedy, but also interview what I call the famous and not so famous stand-up comics, that we can keep talking about this industry, stand-up comedy, that we love. But what's been impatient and what's frustrating is that 5 years in, and over 150,000 downloads, I haven't made any money on it. And I've
Mhm.
tried. I had an online course, but it didn't really go. I've written a couple books, and they've sold a few, but not enough to really, make money. And I've tried a couple other uh, online ideas, because there's a lot of ideas out there,
Mhm.
to monetize my podcast. And the frustration is I haven't. Now, the good news is I love what I do, so I'm going to keep doing it no matter
Mhm.
what. But as a capitalist and as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
I'd rather get a couple bucks,
Yeah,
right?
it's grinding your gears.
Lauren, yeah. I mean, Lauren, you've really taken your podcast and done some amazing things with it. Maybe that's my problem. I don't have this, Jessica and great staff people like you do. But it is a different world.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned, and it's clearly obvious, I'm an older guy, and some of the technology is a little bit more of a challenge for me than it might be for somebody 20, 30 years younger.
Well, I hear that, and you do not see all the wonderful team behind me. We've got Carson, our editor. We've got Jesse, our operations and project manager. We've got Callie, our social media expert. And there's more than that. Those are the ones who touch this podcast on a weekly basis.
Well,
So
it's
yes,
the staff behind the person, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, turn it up for the people in the back.
Well, I think the impatient entrepreneur is somebody that has a creative line instinct that wants to not only do something that they enjoy, but be able to share that with whatever part of the world they might be in. Mm-hmm. What is fascinating to me, Lauren, is that as a brick and mortar business owner, I made a huge impact on Sacramento. I was the first,
sounds like it,
only comedy club for a long time. Brought people like Jerry Seinfeld and Dana Carvey and Jay Leno here, and they allowed the people here to see that. As an insurance broker, I was able to help small business people in Sacramento to insure their businesses and have somebody they could ask the hard questions to and get answers. But I've impacted this community. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about podcasting, and I'm sure you felt this with yours, is I'm now reaching the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have listeners in Africa and India, and I was voted one of the top 10 podcasts in England a couple of years ago. And so you're able to talk to a much broader audience. Mm-hmm. And even though my comedy clubs were a success and I might get 1,000 people through the doors in a week, I could launch a podcast and get over 1,000 listeners in a day. Mm-hmm. And it is really interesting how you can have that impact and reach so many people. And in my sense, you're bringing knowledge and experience. My podcast is pure entertainment and fun. What's great about podcasting is whatever the audience is looking for, they can find.
Right. To digress a moment, I mean, I love business podcasts and audiobooks and books and things like that. But sometimes I just want to relax and laugh and listen to something that brings me joy, that, doesn't necessarily enrich me in like a traditional sense, but it alleviates anxiety because and helps me feel better, just because I need to blow off some steam. And so being able
it's the yin and yang.
Yeah.
What was really great about being the owner of a comedy club, what's interesting about a comedy club is that it's a show. So you have entertainers that you have to manage and you have to book, but it's also a bar because you're selling drinks. So you have to manage bartenders and the purchasing of liquor and the waitresses, but you have to sell food to sell the drinks. Mm-hmm. And so you have a kitchen, and so you have a chef, and so you have that staff. So even though I was into the club business because I loved stand-up comedy and producing the shows, I was managing all these other aspects of that business, which allowed me to learn how to do it so that I ended up opening actual just restaurants. Mm-hmm. And I opened up a great barbecue restaurant called Sticky Fingers.
Cute.
Specialized in barbecued ribs because I had a secret recipe. Okay. And so I used that recipe, opened the restaurant, and had a lot of success with it. So there's that advantage on the brick and mortar side. On the podcasting side, as you mentioned, there's podcasts that want to teach you something or want to help you solve a problem, or in your case, you educate and share valuable knowledge to people that are interested in business. In my case, it's pure entertainment. All you're going to get is a laugh or a chuckle or a good story. However, if you listen to the interviews of the professionals, there's really a lot of industry information shared. Mm-hmm. If somebody wanted to get into it or wondered why they didn't get into it, there's a lot there. One of the fun things I've done recently, Lauren, is that I'm a grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
I love children. And with a buddy of mine, we launched a children's podcast just a couple months ago called Ock's Amazing Adventures. And it's kind of focused on 3-year-olds to 8-year-olds. But Ock goes on these little 5-minute adventures and experiences both fantasy and reality in these little stories. And it's going gangbusters. We just hit over 10,000 downloads, and it's only been a couple months. And it's just so fun to know that this new creative aspect of my life is bringing some joy to children.
Mm-hmm.
And again, around the world, because it's being listened to in all the English-speaking countries. So podcasting is amazing in that end.
It is. How do you spell Awk?
AAWK.
AAWK. All right.
Awk. It's just, we didn't want to have an actual name that, it made up a name so that it male, female, didn't matter. It's just a kid.
Right.
And talks about a 6-year-old, and he goes on different adventures. But some are as mundane as getting his first haircut or going to his first day of school, to visiting Planet Colorful or going to a toy wonderland, a lot of fantasy. And then there's some education. If you go to the aquarium or the planetarium, we have experts that share some information.
Nice.
But they're all in little 5-minute segments. So, and no, it's not a video, it's audio. So they have to use their imagination.
That's tough. It's tough to do a type 5.
Yeah. We talked to some teachers and we talked to some parents, and kids have short attention spans, so you can't go too long. They have their face on a screen all the time, and the parents and the teachers were hoping to find a way to get them off a screen. So even though they're listening to something, all the imagery of what Auk might look like, or what it's like to go out into space and visit the International Space Station, is happening in their imagination. And that's what we're trying to help develop.
I love that. Okay, let's switch gears, shall we? Let's go.
I'm ready.
Let's go into our vulnerability corner. Tell me, please, if you will, something that's happened in your storied business life where, when it happened, it felt like it was the worst thing that could have happened. The rug was totally pulled out from underneath you, and you felt like, holy cow, I don't know how I can recover from this. But looking back, you can now see that it was one of the best things that could have happened to you.
Well, see, I was right with you until the end there. Something that turned out being good.
Yes. Well, you learned a powerful lesson. It was.
Well, I'm a strong believer that failures are the stepping stones to success. That as a salesman that's done everything from door to door to business, you have to get so many no's before you get a yes. You, as an entrepreneur and being an impatient entrepreneur, sometimes you start businesses that really aren't going anywhere, like the submarine. It was just too big to try to make work, too big an expense for the ROI, for the return on the investment. But I had a couple examples that really affected me emotionally, but I don't think I really learned from them. So I don't want to mention that. I'm trying to think of what really happened that taught me something later in life. I don't have a specific thing, Lauren, because I've failed a lot. I've been bankrupt twice, chapter 11, chapter 7 kind of stuff. That was, always really challenging to go through, especially, one of those was what in the comedy business. So you're kind of this fun business, and you have to go to your debtors and say, geez, we're struggling right now. We're going to need to do this. And we want, we're not trying to burn bridges, but this is the reality of business. And those were things that, and maybe that's a good example of what you're talking about, that I've done it twice. The one time I was really young and it was early, and I didn't set aside much debt, and it allowed me to open the comedy clubs. So the main one was while I was in the comedy club business, and I had hundreds of employees and I had various locations. So it was a much bigger deal. And you do learn from two things, is that if you go through a bankruptcy, that you are much more careful financially after that. You're a little less risky. I was saying how kind of loose and crazy I was with money. There could be a
Chaos king.
price paid. Yeah, king of chaos. My bride will enjoy that. I'm going to share that with her. The other thing that I think I did learn is that is excruciatingly painful and financially challenging of going through a bankruptcy and having a judge make decisions on where you can spend money and where you can't, is that if you can survive that, you can survive anything, right? So even though it was really difficult, I got through it. My company went on and went for many years after that. And I got through it, even though I'm sure it added a lot of these gray hairs. But there's so many things that I think a young entrepreneur or even a person in life feels like is the end of the world. And the reality is we're very resilient as human beings. And as long as you try to have a positive mental attitude, you have a good support system around you, that everything, I really can't say there's anything that will win out. Everything can be overcome, and you can get used as a foundation for that next step forward.
See, we got there. You did it. Congratulations.
Well, it was interesting because you were asking about two things that were really challenging, and I alluded to one, is that when my wife and I, but especially my wife's dream was happening, and then 9/11 happened, which we couldn't control. That was really difficult because we lost both a lot of money that we had invested for our future, plus we lost that business. It took a while, but it killed us. And that was hard to watch her go through that. And then the other thing was when I sold my club, it was to somebody that I thought was a friend. And we had an agreement that I would stay on, much like I did with the insurance business, as a consultant and be able to keep working at the club for another year or more so that I could kind of ease out of it because I love my business. I mean, I'm sure you're the same, Lauren, and I'm sure the people you've talked to are the same as entrepreneurs. We don't start a business necessarily to make a buck. We care about it. It's part of our family, and a lot of families are challenged by entrepreneurs because we put all of our focus on the business and maybe not enough on our family and our wives. And that's another mistake. But what I was alluding to was that when I sold the club, I was supposed to stay on and kind of get weaned off it. Well, the guy that I thought was a friend turned on me legally within a couple months. There was a big court battle. We lost money through the contracts. He broke the contract basically, and I had to go cold turkey. And so I was on stage 5-6 nights a week as the MC in my club, which is very cathartic and very fun. And as the owner, and the new owner came along, I was still able to get on stage and have that joy. And then boom, it was cut off. And boy, that took a big, chunk out of my heart because I love that business. It was my child. And all of a sudden it was ripped away unceremoniously, in fact, very nastily, with lawsuits and lawyers and expenses. And those are difficult times to get over. I didn't really learn anything from that, except some people are, but that's why I didn't answer it in the first time. But everybody, I think, as entrepreneurs and even as human beings, we run into challenges, and it's how you deal with them and how you get past them that helps build your character, I believe.
Right. And that's one of the reasons I ask this question of our guests, because I want people to hear exactly what you said, was that you will survive this. I heard someone speak once who gave the advice, just, when something happens like that, in his instance, he was talking about his business literally burning down in front of his eyes, and saying to himself, um, I don't know how yet, but this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And ultimately he ended up rebuilding his business, and it was a stronger business model that came out of it. And just, if you can face a challenge like that, and it has become a mantra of mine that has helped me surmount a few difficulties over the past year or so of, I don't know how yet, but this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Well, I think it goes to the format of your podcast. As an entrepreneur, I think that just by our nature, we're positive
Mm-hmm.
in that we have sometimes an arrogance or a confidence in ourselves that whatever life throws at us, we're able to deal with. And we win some, we lose some, but that is kind of the definition of an entrepreneur. We're not all billionaires. And there's, I'm sure, companies, or the world is scattered with companies that have failed, but it is our nature to at least go into things that we're going to succeed, we're going to be great, we're going to bring something to our community that it needs. And when you come into those things like a business burning down or going through a bankruptcy or health challenges
Mm-hmm.
in life, you it takes you aback at first. That's just human nature. But I think certain entrepreneurial personalities go, okay, what am I going to do to get around this? And that's interesting you bring it up, Lauren, because it is kind of like day-to-day business as an entrepreneur. Because when you run a restaurant or a business or a comedy club or an insurance agency, whatever it is, every day or every week, there's some sort of challenge, right?
Yep.
Whether it's somebody not showing up for work or needing to make payroll, or there's this bill due or something, you have to be able to think quick on your feet and find a solution to a problem. And I think that's really interesting, that correlation that entrepreneurs don't see a calamity as a brick wall to smash into, as much as the opportunity to find a way around it, to get through it. Does that make sense? Or is
Oh
that a
yeah,
little too deep?
I think, I'm just sitting here thinking that we have to be somewhat delusional and optimistic to
Yeah.
succeed.
That's why I said arrogant.
Yeah.
Oh, this has happened. Well, no problem. I'll do this.
It'll be fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Because if you have to trick yourself a little bit while being as realistic as possible. That otherwise we just, it'd be hard to get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes it can be a lonely journey, which is one of the reasons I have this podcast, because I don't, if you have no one else to talk to, hopefully you're tuning in and not feeling quite as alone by listening to stories like yours, and being like, okay, well, I didn't buy a submarine, and
But it's true. Everybody should listen to your podcast, because being an entrepreneur is a solo job. It's usually one person, and it's their drive, it's their creative aspect, it's their instinct that's going to take a company one way or the other. We may fail, we may succeed, but it's usually one person driving it, and that person is always going to have situations that challenge them, that are trying to control what they do. And I think the beauty of being an entrepreneur, that type A personality, is that we see that as a challenge, and we're still kind of arrogant and positive, and we'll find the answer, where a lot of people might just crawl back in their shell and give up. And you don't want to do that. You always want to go forward, because what we talked about 10 minutes ago is that everything is survivable.
Yes. Which tees me up perfectly for my next question, which, when you were when you were a young boy, was there a personality trait of yours where it was called out a lot, like, oh, you're so impatient, or you're so arrogant or competitive, but you realize now, looking back, that it was your superpower all along?
I changed somewhere along the line in high school and in pre-high school. I was pretty much the quiet kid, but I was thrown challenges like a lot of people. My folks divorced when I was 10.
Mhm.
I went to work when I was 15 because I was helping to support my siblings and my mom.
Mhm.
And there were not quote unquote fun times, but it helped me develop into who I am. And so even though it was a challenging childhood, I can look back and say, well, it helped me become who I am.
Mhm.
For example, at the tender age of 12, I got a paper route where you're having to go door to door and talk to people, and
Mm.
you're providing a service and collecting money. It's not fun.
Yeah.
I had to get up early in the morning every day and ride my little Schwinn around and deliver papers. But as much as it was a challenge and not fun at the time, I was already starting to learn the skills that took me through all those adventures to come. And that is being able to talk to a stranger like they're your best friend,
Mhm.
to be able to go door to door knowing there's going to be, you never know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? An angry customer, a happy customer, or no customer. And then what do you do to deal with it? And um, it's also, I think, helps you develop problem solving skills.
Mhm.
And if you don't mind me going off a little bit,
Let's do it.
I think one of the things we've lost in the last couple generations is the children of the last 10 or 20 years don't seem, like everyone's a winner, everybody gets a trophy, all your problems are solved for you. You're not responsible for yourself
Mm.
or anything you do. That is just so wrong.
Mhm.
Need to learn, develop a thick skin, and learn to take responsibility for your decisions. And those are the things that I learned as a young person, that when I opened a construction company and I'm going door to door to try to sell my striping, or I have a music company and I'm going school to school and trying to sell them on the idea of hiring us for an entertainment, to opening a comedy club where I'm trying to get the public to come in and give me money because I'm providing and producing a show. I wouldn't have been able to manage those personal challenges if I hadn't, at the ages of 10, 12, and 15, realized the importance of, I was responsible for my own actions. I had to interact with people I didn't know, whether I liked it or not, and be able to do so.
Mhm.
And those are some skills that I think are getting lost in society. And I hope, the pendulum comes back and we can start teaching kids um, that that you're responsible for what you do, and that you have
Mhm.
to look at challenges as opportunities.
Mhm. Yeah. It always makes me think of growing up. I was being a teenager and starting to get into little shenanigans here and there, and my dad pulling me aside one day, saying, I, if you ever get in trouble, or uh, you can always come to me. If you get thrown in jail, I'll come bail you out. But it better been your stupid idea that got you there, and you didn't follow somebody else.
That was great advice of your father, because I think one of the weakest link in humanity are the lemmings that go
Mhm.
along with what you think are leaders. And the problem is they're not really leaders. They can be leaders and help lift you up, but they can also drag you down. And having the perception as a teenager, especially, it's challenging to know who the leaders are, or versus those who are going to drag you down and make you a lemming, is
Mhm.
important distinctions that I think are a challenge for young people.
Yep. Yep. So trying to let my kids know that now too. As our oldest gets a little older, and she's going off to do things like be smart, have fun,
Yeah.
don't follow anybody else's dumb ideas.
If they jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a
Yeah,
bridge?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I used to get that from my mom
Oh,
all the time.
same. Oh my
But
gosh.
it is, I think, a great podcast that you have, Lauren, because there is such a distinction between entrepreneurs and business owners versus those that go work for the county or the state. It's just a different personality type. We have a different expectation of ourselves, of the world. We have, I think, loftier goals of what we want to achieve. I had several friends in high school that went and worked for the state and the county, and all they wanted to do is their 30 years and retire with a little bit of pension. And I had just a different view. I just wanted to enjoy, you never know when your time's going to come. I
Right.
wanted to enjoy life as I was going. Did I make mistakes? Yeah. Did I blow a lot of money? Yeah. But I had fun.
Yes. And thank goodness. Okay, so getting close to wrapping up here. What's
Sure.
one piece of advice you can give our listeners so that they can make their lives and businesses stronger and better today?
Well, we've covered some important things,
Mhm.
Lauren. I think that if you run across a problem, look at it as a challenge to complete. When things seem dire, you will survive. And I think that it is always important to have fun. So even though obviously in the comedy business there was a lot of fun, but even as a small construction company owner all the way to an insurance brokerage owner, I would find ways to make it fun for me and fun for my staff. And it could be something as simple as telling your staff what a great job they're doing, or having a secretary's day and bringing them lunch, which is real simple and goes a long way with your staffing. To my one of the reasons I was such a success in the insurance business was I had the experience and the personality that my clients were also my friends. Now, I didn't start off that way, but when you're a persistent pain in the ass salesman and you're showing up, every 2 months to get their business, and then when you get their business, you don't just disappear. You keep showing up, and you bring in the donuts, or you bring in a joke for the day, or you build that relationship. You get to know about their kids, or you get to meet their staff. Those relationships add so much value, not only to your business, but also to your life.
Amen.
And so whether you're selling shoes or providing a service, like a locksmith, whatever you do, go into it with a little bit of pride and joy, and interact with those customers or non-customers, whoever you're around, and everybody will come out ahead. Everybody's happier when we're all in this together, right?
100%. Couldn't agree more. Okay, Scott, where can people find you?
Oh, well, geez, I thought you'd never ask. So a couple things. So I talked about my children's podcast. It's called Ox Amazing Adventures. You can find it on all the platforms. It's for ages 3 to 8. There's a new network called Kids Pod. It's on there as one of the special podcasts, so check that out. I have my main podcast, Stand Up Comedy, your host and MC, where we do interviews and share comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. And that is available on all platforms and is heard all over the world. I did do a short version. Those shows are usually about 40 minutes. I felt like people at work needed a break, kind of a comedy break. And so I have a short form comedy podcast called Comedy Appetizers. All the shows are about 5 to 6 minutes, and they come out every Friday, and it's just to give people a laugh before the weekend. And to bring it all together, I do have my own network. It's called the Stand Up Comedy Podcast Network. That's Stand Up Comedy Podcast Network. And it's got videos of people like Bob Saget and Dave Coulier and Amazing Jonathan. There's many podcasts from comics, like 15, 16 different podcasts you can listen to. There's a blog. There's an online comedy course. and but mostly the videos are kind of fun for people. So that kind of encapsulates what I'm doing these days, and it is all for fun, and I'm really enjoying it, and the audience seems to enjoy it, and I hope people get a chance to check those out.
Well, we will make sure they're in the show notes too, in case someone's driving or doesn't have their hands free at the moment. But Scott, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure, as advertised. And thank you.
Well, you're doing such important work, Lauren, that you're providing this great podcast, The Impatient Entrepreneur, in sharing stories about the pros and cons of being self-employed, and how can people survive through whatever life throws at you. And every 5-10 years, something dramatic happens, and we all have to kind of pivot. I think COVID is the most recent example that's changed the world. Maybe the next thing will be AI. But whatever it is, you as an entrepreneur will find the answer.
Wonderful. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Impatient Entrepreneur. Love the podcast? Be sure to share it with a friend or colleague and give us a 5-star review. You can also chat with us on Instagram or Facebook at The Impatient Entrepreneur Pod. Want to star on a feature episode? Head over to theimpatiententrepreneur.com to inquire. Thank you to the team at Coulier & Co. for believing in me and bringing this podcast to life. And thank you to Carson Childers for mixing and editing this episode. I can't wait to see you next time.